Good morning. Could I have your attention, please? First off, we don't have enough experiences for a family reunion. You people going to have to pay better attention than this. It's a real pleasure to welcome you all to the series that has been so exciting. If you have not already done so, please turn off your cell phones and any other instruments that will make loud noises if you just take care of all of that at one time. Uh, we're certainly thrilled that the First Bank of Alabama has agreed to sponsor this program again. And Randy Fields is with us. And Randy, if you would come down and say a few words of wisdom and banking and how to handle the current situation with inflation.
Boy, that was a lot right there. My goodness, if I'd known that, I should have stayed at the office. Hey guys, if, in case you guys did not see me when we kicked off the series, South First Bank has been a proud sponsor. And Dolores, I think it's been 12, 13 years leading into this year. But we recognized as a small institution, we weren't going to be able to continue to thrive as we would like to. So earlier this year, we sold to First Bank of Alabama. And this bank is headquartered in Talladega. Many of you may already bank there. They are a wonderful bank. One of the core values is community, along with service and excellence. And in making the decision to sell the bank, that was our priority one. Who can we sell to that will put the same emphasis on community that we did as a small bank? So I was telling Dolores, it was a no-brainer when I talked to their CEO, Chad Jones. He said, "Where do we sign up?" So I am very excited to continue to be the sponsor here for this series. Hope to do it for many, many years to come. So please, thank you. Thank you. Please do come by and see us. Everybody knows Mr. Chris Kramer sitting at the table. And we love him, and he's not going anywhere. He's staying right where he's at. So, and I also invited Anita Gurley here today. So y'all say hey to her too. All right, so I'm going to turn it over as quickly as I can, but I will tell you this. I was telling Dolores, I told my wife, she started asking me about Christmas planning, and I said, wait a minute, we can't plan for Christmas. I haven't heard Dolores speak yet. And once she finishes, then I know it's time for the season, right? So, all right, one last question. Raise your hand if you still have a calendar on your refrigerator. Okay. All right, so I know you woke up this morning, you got a piping hot cup of coffee. You walked over to the calendar and you saw the date and you got really excited because you said, I'm going to get to see Randy today. No. It's Dolores. All right. Thank you guys so much. We're excited.
I'm really excited about having Dolores back. There's three or four real exciting entertainers that I enjoy. Vanna White, I enjoy every night. She's just really great, and she understands letters, and she can put words together. And then Lady Gaga is one of my favorite also, and she has the pizzazz, charisma, and all of those things. But Julie Andrews, or Mary Poppins, is the one that I really think about. And when I think of Dolores, I think about she has the qualities that all three of them have all rolled into one. So, Dolores, we're just thrilled that you're here. Come and inspire us and dance and do all the exciting things. Just don't get up in the air like Mary Poppins.
The hills are alive.
Big welcome for Dolores Hydock.
Thank you, Dr. Ted. Some of you have heard me tell this before, but that introduction from Lady Gaga, seriously, reminds me of the time that I was supposed to speak at a conference up in North Alabama. And when I arrived at the front door, this woman met me at the front door. She had this piece of paper in her hand. When she said, I'm the one who has to introduce you. I hate introducing people. I'm terrified of public speaking. They gave me this sheet of paper, has information about you. I guess I should try to find something interesting to say about you. It says here that you used to teach Cajun and Zydeco dancing. That sounds kind of exotic. What is that? So I try to tell her, Cajun dancing, waltzes, two steps, try to calm her down. It's going to be fine. We get through the lunch, we get through the program. It's time for her to introduce me. She gets up to that podium. That paper is rattling. She slams the paper down on the podium and says, please help me welcome Dolores Hydock, an exotic dancer. So, Dr. Ted, your introduction came dangerously close to that. We're back. Yay. This is so exciting. I can't tell you how exciting it is for me to be here with you. I am so mad at COVID because COVID forced me to give up all my illusions about everything I would accomplish if I just had the time. We had the time, didn't we? Still didn't get anything done. I still did not learn to speak Italian. I still did not digitize all the black and white Polaroid photos that are in that shoebox in the back closet. I still have not vacuumed underneath my refrigerator. Oh. But all this time did give me a lot of chance to just count my blessings. And when they talked about essential workers and essential trips and essential this and essential that, and I try to think about what is essential in my life, I realize one of the essential things is you. Because you allow me to do something I love to do, and Dr. Ted and Dr. Shirley and Tracy and this library and the wonderful First Bank that make this series possible give me a place to do that. But you know what? It is you that makes the stories happen. Because I have had 18 months of talking to myself. And so I know the difference now if I didn't know it before. So thank you for making the time and effort to come out and support this series all throughout every chance you've had to be here, but especially thank you for coming out today. It's starting to feel like Christmas, Randy. Hate to tell you, right? It's starting to feel kind of holiday-ish out there. So thank you for coming out. You could have stayed home in your pajamas, you know that? But here you are. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. You are a real gift to me. I love the theme of this series. Welcome back, history. It seems so appropriate, not just that we're back again having this series and gathering together, but it's true that history kind of cycles through, doesn't it? I mean, this is not the first time humanity has experienced a worldwide pandemic. It's not the first time that things have gotten thrown into the proverbial cocked hat and we don't really know how they're going to turn out when everything gets straightened out, if it gets straightened out. It's not the first time we've had to adjust and discover we're probably stronger and better at it than we thought we were. So history kind of keeps cycling around. And things in our personal lives kind of cycle around too. And that's what these stories today are about. This whole idea of pedaling hard on the cycle of life, just trying to stay upright and not fall off. I recently came across a sort of silly little poem that kind of addresses this theme. The poem goes, "The circle of life goes round and round. Live long enough, you find that it's true. The student will teach, the teacher will learn. You become your mother. Your mother becomes you." And this first story proves how true that is. My first day of school came the day after Labor Day, the year that I was 5. I already knew my letters and numbers. I could spell my difficult to spell name. I could sit still for 10 minutes at a stretch. And so the first grade teacher and the principal and my parents agreed that I was ready to start first grade, even though my birthday was actually 10 days past the deadline. Well, I thought I was ready to start first grade too. I mean, my two older sisters, Lisa and Alice, they'd been going to school as long as I'd known them. I knew how the routine worked. You got up at 10 minutes to 7, you raced around the house looking for your book report, you stood in front of the mirror and cried about your hair, you ran into the kitchen, ate 2 bites of toast, 3 spoons of cereal, checked your lunchbox to be sure you had the lunch with the mayonnaise if you were Lisa and without the mayonnaise if you were Alice. You kissed mother goodbye and then slam out the back door for the 6-block walk to school. That's all there was to it. Well, on the mornings before I started to school, I would sit there at my place at the kitchen table, sit there sleepy and silent in the red flannel nightgown that turned the bed sheets pink. I would sit there, watch the drama, and then slam, they'd be gone, and I would have my mother all to myself. I'd eat my Cheerios, she'd drink her coffee, we'd plan our day. Sometimes I might help her with the laundry, fold my dad's big white handkerchiefs edge to edge, be sure you match them up edge to edge. I might help her make a cake, stir the cake batter 100 times. I didn't know how many 100 was. I just knew it was a lot. Or if it was a pretty day, we might go to the grocery store or the library, or I might take Peppy for a walk. Peppy was my black cocker spaniel with the long fluffy ears and the bright brown eyes. My mother did not like dogs. We're not having a dog. But she liked Peppy. I'd attach Peppy's leash to his collar. Off would go down the street, only as far as Miss Orphy's house. Would go as far as Miss Orphy's house, 6 houses down. Miss Orphy would be sitting on her front porch. Hello, Miss Orphy. Hi there. How are you? How's your little dog? Peppy's fine, Miss Orphy. Peppy's fine. And Peppy was fine. Peppy never barked at Miss Orphy or ran through her flower beds or made a mess on the sidewalk or tugged at his leash. Now, the fact that Peppy was stuffed, that might have had something to do with his good behavior, but Peppy was real enough to me. And that's how the days went until it got to be time for my first day of school, which, of course, back then did not come in August the way it is now in Alabama. No, it always was in September. In fact, it was always the day after Labor Day. Isn't that the way God meant it to be? I think so. So my first day of school, the day after Labor Day, the night before Labor Day night, Mother set my hair with dippity-doo, helped me pick out the outfit I'd wear, the red and blue plaid dress with the little red vest. Next morning, up at 10 minutes to 7, race around the house, run to the kitchen, 2 bites of cereal, 2 bites of toast, slam out the back door for the 6-block walk to school. My 2 sisters ran on ahead. They were not going to be slowed down by the dumb 5-year-old me, but my mother walked with me, holding my hand, me chattering away the whole time. Who would I know when I got there? Where was I going to sit? What was she going to do all day without me? But as we got closer and closer, I got quieter and quieter. And I was starting to think maybe I wasn't so ready after all. By the time we stood in front of the tall black wrought iron schoolyard fence, I was silent. My mother bent down to kiss me goodbye. This was way before the days of helicopter parenting. Aren't you coming inside with me? No, you'll be fine. Hey, big smile, cheer up. Chin up, remember everything, tell me later. Deep breath. Tap, tap, tap went my saddle shoes across the pavement, in through the big wooden doors. 3 hours later, she was waiting for me, walking me home, me chirping away like a little bird. The teacher was nice. I learned a new song. I got a gold star. I couldn't wait to go back the next day. And she smiled. Oh, relieved, I'm sure. I was on my way. And the circle of life goes round and round. Live long enough, you find that it's true. The student will teach, the teacher will learn. You become your mother. Your mother becomes you. And the circle of life went round and round, and more than 40 years went by. And my then 83-year-old mother left her lifetime home in Pennsylvania to move to Birmingham to live closer to me. About 3 months before she actually moved, she came down to Birmingham for a visit for us to find a place for her to live. We looked at thousands of places. We looked at apartments, condominiums, duplexes. What about a tent in my backyard? I'm not a camper. But we finally found her this sweet little house, skylight, fireplace, shady back porch. This is a can-do, she said. We went over to the leasing office. She filled in the application. I have lots of good references. They're just all dead. She left her deposit check, went back to Pennsylvania to pack. My sister Lisa came from her home in Denver to help me get the house ready for Mother to move in. It was then I learned that my sister Lisa takes a shock and awe approach to interior decoration. Her plane landed in Birmingham at 3:30 on a Thursday afternoon. By 8:30 that night, we were heading toward the checkout lanes at Target, wheeling 2 shopping carts crammed full of throw rugs, curtain rods, draperies, bric-a-brac, potted palms. For the next 3 days, the magnetic strip on my MasterCard did not cool off as we acquired everything from begonias to bedspreads, all of it color coordinated. We washed and scrubbed and measured and hung and arranged and tried to get the gas turned on. Press 1 if blue flames are shooting up out of your water heater. Finally, everything was ready for Mother to move in. Lisa went back to Denver. Mother came to Birmingham to stay. We found her a doctor, a dentist, a hairdresser, a pharmacy, a bank. But except for the church and the public library, she didn't want to join anything. I've got to get my bearings first. I'll know when I'm ready. I'll let you know. And it was 3 months before she handed me the pale green flyer from the local senior center. They have a speaker series, she said. It's set up like a school term. You register for the whole term. You go in twice a week. They have speakers on everything from politics to Persian rugs. I'd like to go. She sent in her registration. The night before the new term was to begin, I went over to her house to set her hair, help her pick out the outfit she'd wear, the new black Travelers Chicos with a green jacket. Next morning, I picked her up, drove her over there, her chattering away the whole time. I had a nice letter from Aunt Eleanor yesterday. Oh, did you notice there's somebody from Pennsylvania on Jeopardy this week? But as we got closer and closer, she got quieter and quieter. And I could tell she was thinking she wasn't so ready after all. And by the time we pulled up in front of that single-story yellow brick building, she was silent. When she saw that I wasn't parking the car, she said, "Aren't you coming inside with me?" "No, you'll be fine. Hey, chin up, big smile, remember everything to tell me later." Deep breath, tap, tap, tap went her cane across the sidewalk in through the big glass doors. 3 hours later, I was waiting for her, driving her home, her chirping away like a little bird. The people were nice. The speaker was good. They had good coffee. She couldn't wait to go back the next time, and I smiled, relieved. She was on her way. Circle of life goes round and round. Say it with me. Live long enough, you find that it's true. The student will teach, the teacher will learn. You become your mother. Your mother becomes you. Well, it's not just our parents who come back and show up in the bathroom mirror as the cycle of life turns round and round. There are other people from our past, other people often from our childhoods that somehow end up in our present and in our future. And they're usually people we thought were pretty strange. And now we are them. And that's what happened in this story. It was a Tuesday morning in late April, several years ago. Phone rang. I answered. I didn't recognize the voice at the other end of the line, but the woman introduced herself and said she was the chair of the City of Irondale Beautification Board. "Congratulations," she said. "You've been awarded a City of Irondale Beautification Board Award. Is it all right if we put a sign in your front yard?" And I thought, what kind of a crank call is this? I mean, I always figured the only way I was ever going to win an award for beautifying my neighborhood was by moving out. But she seemed to be serious. Later on, of course, I discovered she still had one of those signs left in her garage, and she could not retire as chair of the committee until she gave it away. But whatever the reason, the next morning there appeared in my front yard this beautiful black wrought iron sign with scrolly white lettering. And I looked at that sign and I thought, well, okay, that makes it official. I have officially become Mrs. Nash. 7:30 of a summer evening, Reading, Pennsylvania, 1960 something. The two chairs on our front porch would have been dusted off earlier that morning, wiped clean of the thin layer of brown dust that would have settled overnight from last night's softball game in the ball field across the street. Those two chairs were not Southern style wooden rocking chair kind of front porch chairs. They were those squared off metal chairs, the ones that kind of bounce when you sit in them, have a sort of crisscross design in the seat, leaves a basket weave pattern on the back of your legs. Next to our front door, there on the porch, was a small silver insulated box with black block lettering that said St. Lawrence Dairy. And twice a week, 2-quart bottles with those little lids. You remember those little paper hats those bottles had? 2 bottles of whole milk were left in that box. And if somehow we ran out of milk in between deliveries, you could run down to the gas station at the corner where there was a vending machine that spat out a waxy quart carton of milk for 27 cents. The machine took pennies. By 7:30 of a summer evening, Mrs. Nash would usually already be sitting on her front porch, the one right next to ours. You always knew if she was out there the minute you opened our front door. You'd open the door and a cloud of her lily of the valley perfume would come wafting across the railing, engulf you in this fog of fragrance. You'd look over, there she would be, sitting on one of the white wicker chairs that furnished her front porch. She'd be wearing a flowered house dress, open-toed, chunky-heeled, lace-up shoes, her gray hair arranged in tight curls, flat against her head, kind of like a bathing cap. She would sit there, smiling out across the sidewalk, across the street to the ball field on the other side. It was the one moment of rest in her day. Mrs. Nash worked at Chauffeur's Bakery in downtown Reading, rolling out pie crusts and cookie dough and drizzling that thin, sweet white glaze onto the bear claws and raspberry Danish and cinnamon rolls that she sometimes brought home to share with us. Her 8-hour shift started at 4 in the morning. And when she got home a little after noon, she had to look after a house and a husband, the invisible Mr. Nash, whom we never saw. And then whatever time or energy she had left, she would spend in her garden. She would trade out her bakery hairnet for a straw hat with a big wide brim. And there she would be, weeding, feeding, fertilizing, spraying, mulching, talking. We never knew if she was talking to the plants or talking to herself or talking to the invisible Mr. Nash. But she was always out there, taking all the years that it took me and my 2 sisters next door to grow up, to transform that big space behind her house into a prize-winning garden with swooping shrub beds full of lilacs and lilies and old-fashioned roses. You know the kind I mean, the kind that have those droopy blossoms on thin stems, petals curled up like cabbage leaves, so fragrant one blossom could perfume an entire room. I remember when I was little, 7, 8 years old, I'd be playing in our backyard. She would summon me over to our shared backyard fence. She would give me a handful of those roses, the thin stems wrapped in wax paper. "Give these roses to your mother, dear." And I would stagger inside, woozy from the combined aroma of old roses and old Mrs. Nash. Many, many years later, when I learned that she had died at the age of 85, I realized that back then, she must have been about 50. But to my 8-year-old eyes, she looked like she had to be 100 years old as a person could possibly be. The other kids in the neighborhood just called her the old lady with the garden. She was the only house on the block that didn't have any kids. And she was usually sweet and soft spoken unless somebody messed with her yard. She hated it when the neighborhood boys would take a diagonal shortcut running from the alley behind, across her yard, across the street to the ball field on the other side. They only did it if they thought she wasn't looking. But sometimes she'd catch them. She'd see them through her kitchen window. She'd come outside, that screen door would slam behind her. She'd point that finger. She'd say, "Hey, you boys, what are you doing running like that? You should walk on the sidewalk. You could fall and get hurt." And maybe she really was concerned somebody might get injured, but we always figured she just didn't want anybody messing with her garden. The garden where she worked so hard. The garden that finally, the year I graduated from high school, finally won her a Neighborhood Beautification Board award. A green and white sign that said, "Great Gardens for a Growing Community." A sign that she proudly displayed in a flower bed full of begonias and petunias right in front of her house. Our backyard, next to Mrs. Nash's backyard, our backyard was not like that. Behind our house, there was a 5-foot by 15-foot patch of dirt edged with a low concrete rim. We called that the garden. It bloomed purple and pink with hyacinths in the spring. In the summer, my dad planted early girl tomatoes and King Arthur bell peppers. One autumn, it was completely taken over with castor bean plants grown for my sister Alice's 9th grade science fair project. Castor bean plants, highly poisonous plants that grew to be 10 feet tall and would not die, no matter what Alice did to them in her search for a better understanding of the effect of soil pH variation on the growth of Ricinus communis. In addition to the garden, there was a detached garage, lots of room for kids to play. My parents grew children. Mrs. Nash grew a garden. I figured I wasn't ever going to grow either one. As my life followed its little path, no children, no gardens, a lifetime of living in apartments and condominiums with nothing more complicated to care for than a couple of silk chiffleras from Hobby Lobby. And then one day, maybe 20 some years ago, some impulse in me wanted to get rooted. And so I sold my 8th floor condominium on Highland Avenue in downtown Birmingham and moved into an 85-year-old brownstone house in Irondale, my little Mayberry-like community on the eastern edge of town. That house has a breezy front porch, a shady back porch, wavy glass windows that let in lots of light, electrical outlets artistically arranged right in the middle of the plaster walls, and not a single squared off right angle. Everything tilts one way or the other. I know one day I was in the kitchen making breakfast. I was putting some blueberries on my cereal. Some of them got away from me. They fell to the floor, rolled up under the refrigerator. And as I'm standing there thinking, how am I going to retrieve them? They rolled back out. That house sits on not quite half an acre of yard that at one time or another has been home to hybrid tea roses, conifers, Japanese maples, gardenia bushes, muscadine vines, blueberry bushes, and a family of slugs, each of which is the size of a cheap cigar. I moved into that house in November of that year when all of that yard was just sort of tan. You know how yards look here in Alabama in November. They're not really still green. They're not certainly not white with snow. They're kind of tan. And so I really hadn't given much thought to what I was going to do with all that vegetation. Maybe I would pave it, make it a badminton court. I don't know. And then one day, about 2 weeks after I moved in, so it was mid-November, I went out to my car, and right next to the driveway, there's a little shrub bed. And in that shrub bed was a rose blooming in November, a deeply fragrant rose with petals the color and texture of a theater curtain. And the fragrance and the strength and determination and unnecessary beauty of that rose blooming in November next to a concrete driveway seduced me into trying my hand at gardening. Well, that and my French yard man, Frederic. It was the first February. I was in that house. It was a Saturday morning. I was sitting in the kitchen finishing my coffee. This white truck pulled into the driveway. This swarthy young man got out, maybe mid-30s, wavy dark brown hair, chocolate brown eyes, 4-inch long eyelashes that dusted the chops of his cheekbones. He knocked on the back door. "My name is Frederic. I know this yard. It is a big yard. And in July and August, it is a jungle." He gestured toward the tan expanse behind him. I noticed he was missing 2 fingers from his right hand. I did not want to know how he lost them or where they were currently composting. "I used to take care of this yard for the people who live here before you. You want me to take care of you too?" The answer to that would be yes. And so began my collaboration with Mother Nature and Frederic, who turned out to be as much philosopher as yard man, because every time he would come over, he would leave, not just with the lawn mowed, the edges trimmed, he would leave me with some little useful bit of life wisdom that might come in handy somewhere along the way. Now, he taught me, for instance, to pace myself. "Dolores," he would say, "Dolores, nothing is in full bloom all the time." He taught me to be realistic. "Dolores, they are perennial, not immortal." We talked a lot about weeds. I would say to him, "Frederic, we fight and fight and fight these weeds. They keep coming back. We're never going to get rid of them." And he would say, "Dolores, you fight the weeds for the same reason you fight evil and wickedness and stupidity in this world. You fight them not because you think you can get rid of them. You fight them to slow them down." Well, my life lessons from Frederic came to an end much too soon when he got married and moved off with his new wife here to Sylacauga. But I still think about Frederic every time it's February and the forsythia bursts into bloom, because that's when he would come to me and say, "Dolores, it is time to put the pre-emergency on the lawn." And I would think, pre-emergency? Now, there's a great invention. Wouldn't it be wonderful? You could go to Home Depot, get a container of pre-emergency granules, and sprinkle them on your life, avert disaster before it struck. Well, in the 20-some years now that I've owned that garden, or that garden has owned me, I've spent countless hours out there weeding, feeding, fertilizing, spraying, mulching, talking. It's where I practice my stories, my lines for plays. I'm usually out there in a big straw hat, a T-shirt I got from the Red Cross that says, "Starve a mosquito, give blood." Well, one Saturday morning, not too long after that black and white sign appeared in my front yard, I was working way in the back of the yard, and this car pulled up on the street alongside. It stopped, the window rolled down. This man leaned out. He looked, I don't know, maybe about my age. I didn't recognize him. He said, "I just wanted to congratulate you on that beautification board award." He said, "Yeah, that's great." He said, I know you work really hard on this yard. In fact, you sure to remind me of old Miss Coker. She lived in this house when I was a kid growing up in this neighborhood. Yeah, old Miss Coker, man, she must have been about 100 years old, but she was always out here working, big straw hat on, talking to herself. We all thought she was crazy. Boy, you sure do remind me of her." And then he drove away, leaving me standing there looking for a compost pile I could dive onto and die on. Well, later that afternoon, I came inside, cleaned up. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich. Something went flying past the kitchen window. I thought, what in the world was that? I ran outside. I was too slow. I didn't see anything. A couple days later, about the same time of day, again, I'm in the kitchen. Again, something goes whoosh right past the window. I was faster this time. I was out that screen door. It was Michael, the 7-year-old who lives across the street from me, tearing through my yard, taking a diagonal shortcut from the alley behind, through my yard, past the pomegranate, over the stone fence, through the daylilies, across the street to his house on the other side. I said, "Hey!" I had done it. I had become Mrs. Nash. That evening, as I like to do on warm spring evenings, I went out to sit on my front porch swing. Was that lily of the valley? No, that was just my Bengay. I sat down, I looked around. Across the street, Michael and his 4-year-old sister live with their parents. Caddy corner, there's a couple of 30-something newlyweds. Next door, Jason and Lauren just had their third baby. They all call me ma'am. And I know that to them, I look like I am 100 years old as a person could possibly be. And I just have to deal with it. But then I looked at that black and white sign and I thought, you know what? I could do worse than to become Mrs. Nash, a strong, hardworking woman, generous with her roses and her cinnamon rolls, a woman who probably already understood something I'm just starting to figure out. That being the old lady with the garden is not such a bad role to play. You get to talk to yourself in public. You can wear whatever you want. And if you're lucky, your garden and the time you've spent there have taught you some useful life lessons that just might come in handy somewhere along the way. Because let's face it, any rose can be beautiful in May, but it takes a strong, deep-rooted, determined, mature rose to keep on blooming right into November. I wish that story were made up. Well, it's not just people who cycle around in our lives, who reappear in our lives. There are trends and fads that keep showing up too. Bell bottoms came back. Platform shoes came back. Big shoulder pads for women, mark my words, within 3 years, they're back. And other kinds of things keep coming back too. For instance, early in the quarantine, maybe April or May of last year. And by the way, I want to just mention, last time I was here was the first Wednesday of March 2020. How could we have known 9 days later, everything, 9 days, we just made it, just slid in there. Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's a real lesson that, be present to the moment because you never know what moment it's going to be. But anyway, so this was an article, maybe May or April, May of 2020, and it was talking about millennials, young people, Gen Y, Gen Z, these people who were single, not necessarily happily single. And they discovered that suddenly, because of the quarantine, they couldn't meet anybody. They couldn't date anybody except online. And even these digital natives were frustrated by the limitations of technology. That suddenly you couldn't go to a party, you couldn't just go out for a drink, you couldn't get sent on a blind date with the cousin of the friend of the friend of the brother of the person who sat next to you at work. And without being able to actually meet face to face, even these people were frustrated by the limitations of a computer as Cupid. And I thought, boy, there's nothing new about that. Nothing new about being frustrated with technology. Certainly nothing new with being disappointed in a computer's ability to play matchmaker. That's been happening since ancient times. At least it's been happening since the ancient times of when I was a junior in high school. I'm just going to say it was the late 1960s. I'll let you do the math. But I was a junior at Reading Central High School in Reading, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. And we had this social committee that planned all kinds of special events for us. And the social committee decided, the year I was a junior, they decided that we were going to have a dance, high school dance, but it was not just going to be the usual high school dance with the crepe paper streamers in the gym and the color coordinated punch. No, we were going to do something different, something special, something that all the teen magazines said was the latest, coolest thing. We were going to have a computer dance where a computer was going to hook us up with our perfect match. All right, now, if you can, cast your mind back to those ancient times. Cast your mind back to that time when there were no cell phones, no laptops, no Instagram, no Snapchat, no email, no internet. It was a time when you were on the technological cutting edge if you had an IBM Selectric typewriter and a Princess telephone with a lighted dial. Back then, computers were massive metal hulks lurking behind locked doors in environmentally controlled rooms with tape drives twirling and diodes blinking, shuffling thick decks of rectangular punch cards. They'd cost millions of dollars. You at the bank probably had some. They'd cost huge amounts of money and had the computational capability of a Fitbit. And back then, you might have known something about a computer if, say, you were a NASA scientist trying to put a man on the moon. But if you were a typical high school kid, impossible to even imagine now. If you were a typical high school kid, you had no tangible, visible, obvious contact with a computer at all. That was ancient times, wasn't it? In fact, computers were part of this weird, mysterious world of science that was pretty far removed from our much more familiar high school world of language and literature. I mean, in fact, I don't know how it was at high school where you went, but at Reading Central High, the arts and the sciences were in two completely different camps. The arts, language, literature, social studies, drama, music, these classes were taught by kind teachers. They patiently stepped us through the fundamentals of freshman composition and sophomore Spanish. They were the advisors to the debate team in the school paper. But the math and science teachers. All right. How many of you were math and science teachers? Come on, there's always some in the group. Come on. That means all of you were math and science teachers. I know it doesn't apply to you, but at Reading Central, the math and science teachers were serious instructors who wore sensible brown shoes and impressed on us their philosophy that the humanities were all well and good as hobbies, but it was algebra and Newtonian physics that made the world go round. In fact, the difference in these two camps was highlighted in my school yearbook. You know how you take the book around, get it signed not just by other kids, but by the teachers too? The English teacher, Mrs. Edwards, wrote, "Dolores, always keep love in your heart." Mrs. Berkman, the physics teacher, wrote, "For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction." The one exception to this division was our junior year chemistry teacher, Mrs. J.T. Her real name was something like Mrs. Josephine Tarandowski or something. Everybody called her Mrs. J.T. And Mrs. J.T. was named chemistry teacher halfway through the fall term when the regular teacher, Mrs. Weidenhammer, who taught physics and chemistry, was suddenly apparently struck by the irony of trying to teach random motion, volatile elements, and the law of inertia to 16-year-olds who were the embodiment of volatile elements, random energy, and the law of inertia. And Mrs. Weidenhammer just announced out of the blue that she was quitting teaching after 27 years and going to pursue a less strenuous career. She was going to become a missionary to Cameroon. And Mrs. JT was named to take her place. Now, I don't know who was more astonished by that announcement, us or Mrs. JT herself, because Mrs. JT taught senior English. And maybe she'd had a math or science class somewhere in her academic background, but her heart was clearly in the humanities. I mean, she would start each chemistry class by quoting to us from Baudelaire, Balzac, and she seemed as baffled by the molecular structure of benzene as we were. She would gaze at that big chart of the periodic table of elements as if she were pondering a Zen riddle. And she would get all misty-eyed when she spoke of the noble gases. She taught us about protons and electrons, not in terms of positive charge and negative charge, but as if she were describing that strange tango of attraction, that mysterious push and pull of the universe that scientists might try to quantify, but poets know can never be truly measured or understood. She was our fellow traveler through the combustible world of chemistry. And if she was frequently distracted, that was just a little bonus, led to some amazing pyrotechnics. Several unfortunate encounters with the Bunsen burner left her with short sleeves and no eyebrows by the end of the term. And one interesting explosion left this yellowish brown stain on the chem lab ceiling that when it dried looked remarkably like a map of the United States, complete with Alaska and Hawaii. So that was chemistry to us then. That was science to us then. It was mysterious and unpredictable and a little bit dangerous. And computers were part of that whole mysterious, unpredictable, slightly dangerous world. And that's why we were so excited that we were going to have this computer dance. This was science. Anything could happen. This is the way it was going to work. If you wanted to go to the dance, you signed up. And they issued you a 5-digit number. That was your number, 5-digit number. And they gave you a questionnaire to fill out, 20 questions about your likes and dislikes and hobbies. Then you turn in the answer sheet. Everybody turned in their answer sheets. They were gathered up together and they were shipped off to this big computer in New Jersey. That was the cloud to us then, New Jersey. The computer would work its magic, send it all back. 3 weeks later, on the night of the dance, you would get to school. There in the front hall, the members of the social committee would be seated at this long table. You'd go up to them, tell them your 5-digit number, and they would give you a punch card with a 5-digit number printed on it, the number of your perfect match. Then you'd go into the gym where one wall, the perfect match wall, was papered over with these long strips of green and white striped printer paper. You remember the green and white striped printer paper? It listed all the 5-digit numbers and who they belonged to. And finally, you would see the name of your perfect match. Now, there was just one rule, and that was that you had to dance the first dance of the evening with your perfect match. And then after that, you could dance with whoever you want to dance with. We didn't understand that rule. We would want to dance with this person all evening. We'd end up dating this person the rest of the year. We'd end up marrying this person. A computer was matching us up. It was going to be perfect. Well, in junior year of high school, I was madly in love with Dave Schwartz. And Dave Schwartz was madly in love with me. Or he would have been if he'd known I was alive, which he didn't. Dave Schwartz was not my usual kind of crush. I mean, in freshman, sophomore years, I would usually get all infatuated with pale, moody, intellectual types like Michael Kelly, whose long brown hair flew down into his brooding brown eyes as he hunched over his guitar at the school hootenanny, singing mournful songs about Scottish women named Heather, whose long blonde hair floated out on the breeze as she stood on the misty moor waiting for her own true love who would never return from the sea. I don't know. Freshman year, there was something appealing about all of that damp longing, but by junior year, I was ready for less drizzle and more sizzle. I was ready for Dave Schwartz. Dave Schwartz. He had reddish blonde hair. In fact, now I think about it, I didn't know then, but now he kind of looked like a young Robert Redford. Reddish, yeah, reddish blonde hair, broad shoulders, muscles, and he shaved. Every day in junior year, he shaved. He was an Eagle Scout, and you could tell just looking at him that that Boy Scout knew something about nature. Never mind those chemistry experiments. This was a guy who could teach a girl a thing or two about biology. And I just knew he was my perfect match. And so now all I had to do was convince the computer of the same thing. So I signed up for the dance. I got my questionnaire. I got my number 2 pencil. Question number 1, did I like pets? Pets. Pets. We never had a pet. My mother would say, pets. Pets require time, food, money, attention. There are 4 children in this house who need time, food, money, attention. What do we do with a pet? No hamsters, no gerbils, no goldfish, no parakeets. But I knew Dave Schwartz had a big German Shepherd at home. So did I like pets? Yes. Question number 2, did I like sports? Sports. Is that where you get 6 for a basket, 2 for a I knew how Dave Schwartz would answer that question. Did I like sports? Yes. And so it went. Not one answer accurately reflected who I was or what I actually thought. Every answer was simply designed to get the computer to hook me up with Dave Schwartz. Well, the night of the big dance arrived. I got ready to go. I put on my turquoise John Mayer of Norwich sweater, my turquoise and yellow plaid miniskirt, my turquoise fishnet stockings. Dab of Jean de Tay cologne behind each ear, inside each elbow. I was ready to go. My best friend Carol already had her license. She came, picked me up. We drove to school. We walked into the front hall. There was a swarm of students standing there at that table, grabbing for their perfect match punch cards. Carol and I got our cards. We ran into the gym, ran over to the perfect match wall where there was a crowd of kids standing there, staring at the wall, staring at their cards, staring at each other in horrified disbelief. And in 10 seconds, that same look was on my face too. My perfect match was Danny DeFazio. Danny DeFazio flunked shop 3 times. He rolled his own cigarettes. And he wore so much grease in his hair, his comb left deep parallel tracks in it like corduroy. And he was my perfect match. What I didn't know is that Danny DeFazio had filled in his questionnaire trying to get the computer to hook him up with Cheryl Martin, the tall blonde captain of the varsity cheerleading squad, and exactly the kind of athletic, outdoorsy girl I was trying to pass myself off to be. But Cheryl Martin had gotten matched up with Nicholas Belinsky, a flute-playing sophomore who wore white socks and hush puppies and loved classical music, because she had filled in her questionnaire trying to get the computer to match her up with Bill Westerhoff, the sophisticated senior who actually read the New York Times review of books. We had all done it. We all tried to trick the computer. And in the process, we all got matched up with the last person on earth we would ever want to be seen with. I mean, the computer probably did a great job of matching up our imaginary selves with our imaginary dream date, but our real selves? Our real selves were left standing there, staring at the wall, feeling folded, spindled, and mutilated. The band, Dr. Dredd and the Operators, began wailing out the opening notes of Hang On Sloopy. And thus began the longest 3 minutes of our young lives, the required first dance with our perfect match. As soon as the final chords reverberated off the tile walls of the gym, we all smiled at each other through gritted teeth, pretended we had to go talk to somebody, and we all scooted off to find our usual friends in our usual spots. The athletes and cheerleaders all gathered at one end of the bleachers. The college prep kids were there at the refreshments table. The greasers all slipped out the side door for a smoke. Within a nanosecond, we had sorted ourselves out. But then we inched out of our corners, asked each other to dance, laughed about the stupid computer, our protons and electrons mixing it up in that strange tango of attraction, that mysterious push and pull of the universe that scientists might try to quantify, but poets know can never be truly measured or understood. I did get to dance with Dave Schwartz that night. I'm pretty sure I asked him. His wool jacket scratched my cheek as I leaned my head on his shoulder for a slow dance. I breathed in deeply. Suddenly, my face felt hot. My head felt spinny. My stomach did flip-flops. I thought, oh, this must be true love. And then I realized, no, it was just a chemical reaction. His English leather aftershave colliding with my Jean Naté cologne. It was making me feel a little sick. The entire slow dance, he just talked about going camping with his dog and his favorite players in the NFL and NBA. And it didn't even take the entire slow dance for me to realize Dave Schwartz and I had nothing in common, nothing to talk about. He was clearly not my perfect match. Though the evening was not a total loss, I did spend 30 minutes down in the cafeteria talking with Dennis Kelleher, a pale, moody, intellectual boy from my English class. And we made a date to go to the library after school on Monday. I didn't realize it then, but I realize it now. Mrs. JT was right. Chemistry, at least human chemistry, will always be more art than science. And no computer will ever solve the equation that has been baffling human beings since the beginning of time. That mysterious, unpredictable, slightly dangerous mathematics of the heart that makes 1 + 1 = 1. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you. Thank you.
Miss Dolores, thank you so much. She is always the perfect end to our series, and I just want to make sure you know that she's got some things for sale over here. Stop and visit with her. And I'm so excited to see you all out today. We tried to put together a series that we thought would keep everybody somewhat safe and that everybody would be able to enjoy. And so we're going to take some time to evaluate. We did a short 5-series session this time. We're going to take some time to evaluate and see what we can put together in the next series. And I'll get with Dr. Spears, but I do want to say thank you so much to you. Miss Dolores was right. We have performers like Miss Dolores that come to Sylacauga because you show up. So we wouldn't have anything if it weren't for you. I also want to thank Randy with First Bank, Mr. Chris, and Nita. Thank y'all for coming. Please thank Chad Jones for us. I also want to thank Dr. Shirley Spears in the back with the Comer Library Foundation for working so tirelessly to raise money so that we can have programs and things. And so sponsors and the Hickory Street Cafe for the cookies. And I also want to mention back at the back table, Miss Jane. Miss Jane, would you wave? Miss Jane came and got here early every week and made sure everybody had water and cookies. So thank you for coming too, Miss Jane. Thank you. Well, thank you, Miss Jane. You're precious. Again, thank you all. You'll be hearing from us again soon, but please have a great holiday season coming up. And Dolores, thank you again for taking us out to the holiday.